Welcome to the Trending Tokens podcast with Jake Vale and Jeff Pulver. Jake is a marketing consultant for T0 and consults in the security token space. Jeff is an internet pioneer known for his work in VoIP and has invested in more than 400 blockchain startups. He shares his knowledge through a program called the Pulver Edge. Our guest today is JD Seraphine, the founder of Vision Tree, the company behind the feature film project Atari, Fistful of Quarters, who will be discussing how he landed the project, why finance using blockchain, the Bushnell token, and a separate utility project called Coiin, Coiin. All opinions on the Trending Token podcast are the opinions of Jake, Jeff, and the guests. Nothing should be taken as legal or trading advice. The content on the podcast is for informational purposes and educational purposes only. So we're here with JD Seraphine, who's landed the Atari project. And JD, I feel like a really good way to introduce you is to let you explain how you landed the Atari project.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on, Jake. It was actually a pretty crazy story. It was October 1st, 2016. I was with my son. I was actually taking my oldest son to soccer practice and was going to meet my business partner to play golf. And I'd called an Uber to go. And we got in the Uber and we start driving, and the driver starts talking to me and making conversation. He asked what I do, and I said, I'm a producer, both, film and TV. He says, what kind of producer? And I said, well, I kind of sit on both sides of, the line. I think true producers are kind of have one foot in the business side and one foot in the creative side. So we have a fund where we finance and develop, film and TV projects. And so he says, I want to pitch you a project. And I'm like, well, my son kind of gives me a strange look, and I'm like, of course, I'm always down to hear a good pitch. So let's hear it. So he tells me his whole journey and his whole story. His name's Brian Hecker, and writer, and just basically tells me his whole story of how he got the rights from Nolan Bushnell. They went to first to Steven Spielberg's company and pitched it. Spielberg's company said, if you have they wanted to do it as like a $15 million HBO movie. And they basically said, if you they basically, Brian and his partner turned him down. He said, if you get Leonardo DiCaprio to play Nolan Bushnell, then you have your big movie. Was able to get Leo's company to come on board the project. And so basically they pitched it to Leo. He loved it. They wanted to do it. It went to Paramount. Actually, there was a bidding war between all the studios in one day, and Paramount won the bidding war, and the project went there. So it sat at Paramount. Basically, the guy who's running Paramount ended up letting the project go because, ultimately, when the guy is running the studio leaves, and there's other factors that were at play, but ultimately, the movie stalled, and Brian, in his wisdom, activated what was called his reacquisition rights. So in the writers union contract, there's a little known clause where if you initiate a project and take it into a production company or studio, and in 5 years they don't greenlight the movie or project, then you can activate your 2-year window to reacquire the rights for only the direct costs. So that's where, when I met Brian, he was in the middle of his 2-year window to acquire the rights, back from Paramount for the movie. So as he's pitching me this and telling me the story, I'm thinking in my head, like, if this guy's telling me the truth, like, we're going to close the doors and we're not going to let anyone else get this deal. Like, we're going to do it. It's exactly the kind of project we're looking for. And so I had to meet my business partner right away, because he was there where, the Uber was taking us. It was actually at the Rancho Park Golf Course right across from Fox Studios. And, he pitched my partner. My partner was like, you're the guy we've been looking for. And we did our due diligence, and we closed with a cashier's check into Paramount before Christmas. So, from October 1st to Christmas, we closed on it. But the way I got the project was basically from a random Uber ride with my Uber driver, who's now, our partner on the project, who's a Brian Hecker, who's a really awesome, just, creative force of nature, just a great guy.
And how good is his driving?
Oh, he's actually, what's crazy you asked that is he's the only, he won an award from Uber, like the 6-star award or something.
Wow.
He's literally the highest rated Uber driver on the West Coast. So he has like a 4.98 or 4.99 rating or something. And he's done over 20,000 Uber rides. So he basically started Ubering to find an investor to come up with the capital to acquire the project back from Paramount. And he thought, you know what, like we live in LA, I'm just going to drive around. And if I meet, you know, someone who's a private investor or a producer, I'm basically just going to pitch them the project. And so he had gotten a number of, you know, groups. He had some companies that were interested when we came in, and that's where we moved quickly to just, you know, to secure the deal. But, you know, he had been doing it for a long time, and it was like, you know, it was, I give him a lot of credit. I mean, Brian, the tenacity that Brian Hecker has had with this project from the beginning all the way through, all the ups and downs, is the reason that we are where we are today. Because it's, you know, a lot of times these kind of projects, they stall, they go sit on a shelf, and people just forget about them, they move on. But, you know, Brian held strong and continued to push until he found us, and then we stepped in, and now, you know, now the thing is rolling forward. So that alone is its own movie / TV show.
You said that you were, I think, at a Start Engine conference, and during the height of the ICO craze, and it was good. You thought that would be a good funding model, but you also looked at it and thought it would be pretty risky to try and do it without going the compliant route.
Well, it was actually before that. Like, so I about 4 months before the Start Engine conference, 5 months, 6 months, something like that, I was sitting with a friend of mine. Actually, his name is Greg Markell. He's like he's just one of the pioneers of digital marketing, like in a lot of the different waves of digital marketing. He's been at the very front of like SEO and these different iterations of digital marketing. And he's worked with, you know, Tom Cruise and all these major studios, and he's an amazing guy. He's really well connected in the West Side tech community. And we're sitting there having dinner, and he was like, "What are you going to do with the movie? Like, have you thought about how you guys are going to fund it?" And I said, "Well, you know, we're looking at all the options, looking at traditional routes, studio financing, all these different things." And I said, "But I want to incorporate some element where, you know, video gamers and Atari fans can own a piece of the film." And a big part of why, you know, we wanted to do that is because ultimately, you know, we had some success 7 years ago. We crowdfunded a documentary called Sirius, which is basically an ET conspiracy doc that 100% of the financing was crowdfunded. We then, which was cool, you know, it was most successful crowdfund until 3 years ago. But the cooler part of the whole thing was we then built up a momentum, like a grassroots movement, you know, with our partners. And we released the film in a direct-to-consumer release 11 months later, subtitled in 17 languages. And we did over $1 million in direct-to-consumer sales, basically a digital self-distribution of the film. And what it showed me was that when you have an audience, when you have a community that's built around a project that has that vested interest to see it be successful, it really is like an amazing recipe, you know, for how to promote a film, I think, in the modern era where there's so much noise and so much craziness in terms of digital marketing. So I looked at, ever since we did that project, I've been looking for a project that was a larger project that we could show that the model worked at scale, and B, the right technology to help us scale a lot of the stuff that we were doing manually in 2012 and 2013. So Atari was, in my mind, when I met the writer and we looked at it, was the perfect project, because you look at the gaming community and there's 2 or 2.7 or 3 billion gamers, whatever, depending on who you talk to, around the world. And gamers, you know, it's not like, you know, video gamers are just like white guys who are 36 and, you know, like to eat Cheetos. It's like, no, there's a whole different array of different gamers, and it's like, you know, it's almost like a rainbow coalition of different, you know, ages and genders and every demographic you can imagine. So for us, it's like, okay, if we can get that community galvanized, rallied around the movie, that's how we can drive the success of the film in a whole new way. And so I was sitting with Greg and we were talking about it. I said, I've been looking at equity crowdfunding because I had been talking to WeFunder and some different platforms. And I just said, to be honest, like, it just seems like there's something missing from the dynamics of it. It seems like almost like a very stale kind of feeling when I look at equity crowdfunding sites and the activity and how it's being done. And he said, have you thought about using an ICO to fund the movie? And I was literally like, what the F is an ICO? And I Googled it, and it was the day that the CEO of Mozilla raised $30 million in 30 seconds. And I literally turned to him and I'm like, this is crowdfunding on steroids. And I had heard about Bitcoin, and I almost bought a bunch of Bitcoin in 2012 and 2013, which obviously, like a lot of people, I wish I had now. But ultimately it was like, it was just that was the epiphany, or that was the aha moment. And it just, from that moment, I went down the rabbit hole. Now I was lucky because I had, I was connected to like Brock Pierce and a lot of like the West Side, Los Angeles tech community through a group called Media Entertainment Technology Alpha Leaders. So it's called Metal. And I was able to talk to Brock and a lot of people that know, that just knew. I mean, it was like getting dropped off the deep end. Brock immediately was like, everybody's moving towards SEC compliant tokens. Everybody's moving away from the ICO model already, because he knew, and a lot of people knew already, that, to do anything based in the US with an ICO at that moment, it was like, it was already it was already it was already too late. It wasn't the moment. So, but the problem was nobody really knew where security tokens were headed. There wasn't really a clear path forward. So I was like, okay, well, what does that mean? And nobody really could give me any answers. So that kind of started my journey down the path. And then the Start Engine conference, what was interesting is when I was sitting there, there's all these lawyers who are kind of beating a drum, and they're doing their part, just saying, well, the Howey test and this and that, and a bunch of stuff that tech people, frankly, and crypto guys did not want to hear. And so people were standing up in the audience and like shouting at these panels of people, because they were pissed off, because they're like, look, like the whole part of the promise of this whole movement, the technology, is like the democratization of the access to wealth creation and the free movement of energy that happens with that peer-to-peer transaction, where we don't need banks, we don't need governments, we don't need centralized authority to tell us this is what you should or shouldn't do. And that's somewhere in the mix between the ICO world, which still, there still is that free movement of energy and on crypto exchanges and in that community. It's obviously been pushed out of the US to a large degree, which I think is actually a mistake, for the US and the US economy, and for a number of reasons from a technological standpoint. But ultimately I was sitting there looking at it, and I was like, and it was kind of frustrating, because I feel like and again, I believe that security tokens have a ton of potential. I believe in the future of what this whole ecosystem is going to evolve into. But I also think there is something to be said about that free flow of energy and that democratization, of access for everyone, and not just, accredited investors and guys who are rich. Like, it's supposed to be a way for everybody to kind of get in the game. And so that's what we started working on. We have another project called Coiin, COIIN, which is like a utility token DApp that we've been developing. And there was no ICO, but it was just more about, let's build a platform that will tie into our marketing of the film, where people can, earn a token, and they can engage, and they can become part of the process without having to be, an accredited investor. So,
and how did you get Nolan back involved? Because I know that he's involved with Coiin, right?
Yeah, so he's an advisor on Coiin. I mean, Nolan, right when I came on, to the movie, obviously I had met Nolan, that same West Side LA tech group I mentioned, Metal. Nolan is one of the OG members of that group. So I met Nolan for the first time. Actually, the first time was my first time I went to that group. He actually introduced me on the stage, because there was they do this thing called Speed to Cool, where you have to, basically say, you say a couple things, like one thing you got arrested for, and like one other cool fact or whatever. And so Nolan was the one, he was emceeing the event. And so Nolan, the first time I met Nolan was he handed me the microphone, and I told him I just made a movie with a real alien in it, and then something about I've been arrested for a lot of things or whatever. But Nolan, and then this next time I met Nolan was when he was signing his book called Finding the Next Steve Jobs. And so it's funny, I still have a copy of this book, where years later, it's like, he had signed this book for me. But right when I got involved with the project to connect with Nolan, I connected with his wife, Nancy, who's amazing. And, as we decided to move down the blockchain and tokenization path, obviously presented it to him and told him, look, I'd love for you to be involved as an advisor and really have you be the face of the security token, literally. Like, I want to call the token the Bushnell token, because from my perspective, again, it's like George Washington's face is on the quarter. It's commonplace to have like the founding fathers on, currency. And it's like the founding father, or one of the founding fathers of the whole tech revolution, Nolan, should be one of the first guys that has his face on a crypto token. Like, if you trace back, and I know, Jeff, you have your place in the pantheon of tech innovations, but if you go back, before there was Jobs and Apple, Jobs was inside of Atari incubating the personal computer inside of Atari with Wozniak. You have a team of guys working on a system where they could play video games over the high-speed phone lines at that time, which would have been the first commercial version of the internet. And that's like, you're talking about the mid to late 70s, which would have been way in front of everyone else. So before there was, Gates and all this stuff, like you can really trace, back to Atari, a lot of really important innovations that helped lay, the foundation for the whole digital revolution. So Nolan's place in our mind, and kind of my mind, in that pantheon of like tech icons like Jobs and Gates, like we feel like Bushnell should be on that Mount Rushmore of tech guys. So that was the idea, is like, let's put his face on the token. Let's make, make him the face of that. And then I also, wanted him just to advise on Coiin, because Nolan is the kind of guy, if you meet with him or you get to know him, it's like, he's still the consummate like innovator and entrepreneur. Like you'll be sitting at lunch and he'll like look at your watch and he'll look at what some lady's doing. And he's like, what if we could create an app that da-da-da-da-da? And he'll literally just in that moment see the way to solve a problem or see an opportunity to innovate and create something. And he still has that spirit. And I actually, in terms of the movie, I think that's the spirit. Like if we, not to go too far off to what you asked, but the spirit and the kind of the transcendent thing about this film is literally that we're at a moment as a species where in order to evolve, in order to get out of the mess that we're in, we literally have to innovate our way out. We literally, as a species, have to become like Nolan Bushnell or like many other people already that I feel like are already in the crypto and blockchain world that get this, that it's like, we have to go solve problems and we have to innovate. We have to use technology. We're going to have to be creative. And I think that's the part of Nolan's story and journey. And in a way, he's kind of the archetype for what I feel like the human race needs to undertake in order to, make this evolutionary leap that we have to make to get ourselves out of this situation that we're in. So, that Nolan kind of embodies so much of that. So I, brought him into as an advisor on Coiin, and, he's a partner on the project, on the movie. Of course, he's a co-executive producer and is, it's like his official biopic. It's not like some unofficial thing or something. So, where he's actively involved in all of it, and he's a great man, and I'm very fortunate to be working with him and to have met him. So, yeah, that's kind of where things stand with that. But, look, I think that we're at a really unique moment with the security token space where I believe we are going to see things finally really pick up rapidly in terms of liquidity as, T0 and many other players, step up and come up with new solutions to bring that crowd into this space and to really pick up the intensity and the activity. I think that, the next 1 to 3 years is going to be really interesting in seeing kind of how that whole landscape plays out. I'm just glad that we're kind of here at this time,
It's awesome to hear about a project that started, back in 2017 or 2016 that lasted through the ICO phase and ended up, with a security token and a utility token possibility. It's a great business model.
And it sounds like it's a foundation for other people to follow once this, once you see how this evolves. So it's a platform for other movie makers, perhaps, and other projects that others can apply this mindset to, which is very interesting also itself.
Yeah, that's the hope, man, is that we can blaze a new trail for people. And people always ask me, like, do you think that, is it hard? Did you make a good choice in doing this? And I'm like, I feel so, but I mean, time will tell, if I was smart or I was crazy,
So
or a mixture of the two.
What is the timeline for the actual release of the movie, and what plans do you have to create more awareness outside the geek tech gaming community?
So the current timeline is we're looking at, probably later 2020. So we're in the process of finalizing casting in our deal with our studio distribution partner. It'll likely be Paramount, but we're still negotiating the final release date and all that kind of stuff. So there's nothing official to announce yet on that. But yeah, and in terms of marketing, I mean, we're going to combine the best of like a traditional and unconventional theatrical release. The budget for the film is pretty large, so it's not like the kind of movie like we could just go like the documentary I did 7 years ago and just go release it online. Like we definitely are doing a wide theatrical release, not just in the US but internationally, and we're talking to groups in China, and we're exploring all avenues, imaginable for distribution and marketing. Our goal is to make $30 million in marketing hit like 100. And the way we do that, I feel, is by having a community that's rallied around the project, that has a vested interest to see it through and see it that it's successful. I think that's how we get there.
There's a Reg D, Reg S running currently?
Yeah, there's a Reg D and a Reg S running currently. And we are either going to do Reg CF for like that $1.2 million or whatever it is, million and change unaccredited piece. Yeah,
$1,070,000.
Yeah, so the $1,070,000 unaccredited piece, or we're looking at the Reg A plus. I've been looking at that since very early because I was at that Start Engine conference and everybody was all hyped up about the Reg A plus being the way, and and it has a lot of potential, and I do think it makes sense, and it's actually well fit for what people are looking to do. But the problem has been the SEC, and I know that Blockstack just got pushed through and a few others, but we'll see how that goes. We're not even going to look at that until we're through this final push on the fundraise that's happening right now, and then we'll look at using a Reg A plus possibly to take all the shares or tokens and just make them liquid and tradable.
I was going to say, what is the estimated running time of your film?
It'll be about 2 hours. Like the script we have now is literally right at 120 pages. So typically in the movie business, you generally plan for about a page a minute, which can fluctuate if there's, depending on how much action and things you're talking about. But the general estimate is like a page a minute. So we're right around 120 pages. So it's an epic film. I mean, that's part of the reason it's a big budget, is like the scope of the story is very ambitious. It's 120 locations. It's over 60 speaking roles. It spans Nolan's life from when he's baptized as a Mormon in Utah, which he's definitely the furthest thing from like a hardcore Mormon that you're gonna find. But from that point all the way through first creating Pong and all the battles he had to go through with that, and then building Atari and launching that, and then bringing in Warner Brothers when he needed funding to scale, and how that was kind of like the beginning of the end. And then I don't want to give away the ending because I don't want to ruin everything, but it spans that whole kind of golden age of Atari being like the fastest growing company in American history. So yeah, it's a big movie.
I was asking about the running time mostly because I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool if you also provided it when you released it to DVD in some format that gamers would use it as a game, so that you would actually create in the software marketing channels, basically pre-sell the story as a game, even if all you do is watch the movie and don't have much interaction with it, but actually just use the storyline as it's produced, but formatted in game format so the console folks can watch it through their platforms.
Yeah, well, we definitely can do that. I mean, I think a lot of DVDs will play in that world, but I mean, even in terms of distribution, like we're going to look to do a few unconventional things, in terms of, especially looking at like some of the blockchain powered, distribution platforms out there. We want to do something cool, but I mean, again, we have to hybridize that with what works well in a conventional wide release, because the numbers are large, and we think the potential is big. I mean, you look at Bohemian Rhapsody, it just did almost $1 billion in theatrical business, and this was like 7-8 months ago. And it's a biopic. It takes place during the same time period as our film, and it has a built-in global audience. Just like they have Coiin, we have the Atari brand, which Atari brand is it's this cool kind of retro brand that just it hasn't lost its sheen over the years, despite not really being an active big player in gaming for a long time. And maybe that's part of the reason it still has its cool, but yeah, we feel like that's the target that we're aiming for. Not that we'll do the same business as Bohemian Rhapsody, but they just proved or showed that there is that model is possible for this type of a movie. So that's what we'll be attacking, is like kind of the primary strategy for distribution. But then there's we want to use tokenization and blockchain in some cool ways to do some different things, and hopefully show the studios and people in the business that there's these new models for ways to put out content. So,
I mean, there's certainly ways to create unique fan experiences and ways that you can create through, unique opportunities to interconnect the investor community with the fan base and do things that are just one of a kind that just never could be done before. While you've been marketing your project, have you run into any confusion with people who last year and the year before ran into the team selling the Atari Coiin?
Yeah, of course, and I know some of those guys. Like I know Daniel Dahl-Steinberg, who I really like a lot.
I know him too.
Yeah, he's a good guy, and it's funny because I think Daniel and I, the first time we met was at that Start Engine conference, the one that we referenced earlier. So we met at that conference, and he was telling me what he was doing, and I was like, yeah, whatever we can do to collaborate and share resources, I'm happy to be connected. And there hasn't been a ton of confusion. I mean, that's also part of the reason at one point when I didn't know they were launching a token, we're like, well, maybe we could call it the Atari movie token or whatever. And then luckily I found out that they were doing a lot of stuff around gaming and tokens and all these different things. And so that was part of the reason too. And looking at it was like, okay, well, our movie is really about Nolan. It's his biopic. It's about his legacy in tech, and it's about the early years of Atari, and so, yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of that, but I think most people in this space, to be honest, like especially in the crypto and blockchain world, like they're extremely intelligent, extremely tech savvy. It's not like there's so much complexity in this ecosystem and how things are developing in so many different directions that I feel like and maybe I'm just lucky and it's people I'm running into, but the people I run into in this space are they're just hyper intelligent for the most part. And so, and it's weird when I came into this space, I've told a lot of people this, like, I felt like it was like my community. Like I felt like it was the place that I was supposed to be. And even in some ways more than the movie business, and nothing against movie business. I love a lot of people in this space, even though it's got a bad reputation. There's a lot of great people doing, with creative people that have good intentions about what they want to do with media in the world. But it's something about the crypto community and the blockchain world that it really just, I don't know, immediately felt like there was so many like-minded people that were committed to, using this technology and more importantly, just making impact in the world. Like to me, when you realize where we are as a species right now at this moment, and you understand the stakes, like there isn't anything bigger than working to do everything we can to solve that. Because if we don't do that, the implications are, very clear and grave. Now, if we actually, I believe, which I'm an optimist, and I believe that we are going to make the evolutionary leap as a species that's possible, then, I believe there's a new golden age that's ready to take hold. And I think the digital asset world and the crypto and blockchain world is the foundation for it. And I think that's what excites me about being in this space. So.
What have your friends in the entertainment industry thought about your shift into crypto, blockchain, and promoting your project the way you have?
Well, it's a mixed bag, to be honest.
And does your family get it? I mean, do the people, your friends in the music industry, for example, do they see the potential the way you do?
I think it's hard for people who are not in the space to understand the space. I think
that is our challenge.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest. Talking to people, even like my father, who's like, he's like, I try to explain it to him. He's like, look, I just don't get it. He's like, I hope it works for you, JD. I hope it, da 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 da. Like, I'm like, Dad, just like, let me and you try to explain it. That is a challenge. But look, some people love it and are excited about it. And they're like, I can see why this is going to work. And then you have other people that are resistant about it. And, I had one person text me when they saw it because they were trying to bring in some financing through a more conventional avenue, and trying to kind of influence me to go down a certain road. And they saw when we made the initial announcement last year, and they were like, why did you, turn down, money from such and such, big Hollywood funder to go do a crowdfund with Bitcoin? And I was basically just like, well, I didn't even respond because, to be honest, it's like they don't understand like the bigger picture of what we're trying to do. So yeah, it's a mixed bag, and I think ultimately there's a lot of people at very high levels that are very interested in what this can do, I think it's just a matter of someone like us and other projects that I know that are out there, just demonstrating, the case studies and the use cases for how it can work. And I think based on that, we're going to see more people come into the space in the film and entertainment world. I mean, there's a lot of problems that the technology is well suited, to solve and create greater efficiency, in systems. And I think that's where, when studios see that and they understand the bottom line implications, just because most businesses are just, where they're programmed to make decisions based on what's best for the bottom line of their business and their profits. So if that's the reality of how things work, and sorry, I'm walking into my office here and got some dogs. If that's the reality of how things work, then we know that for larger companies and studios to make a shift and adopt some of these new technologies, they're going to have to see, how is this going to influence or affect their bottom line in a positive way? If they see that, then it's a no-brainer. It's not like a big, it's not some sort of a big undertaking to convince them to do it if they can see how they're going to make money. And I think that's, whether that's a good or a bad thing or whatever, however you look at that, that's just the way it is. So I believe that, there'll be pioneers, in the space, and, hopefully we'll be amongst them that demonstrate, for the bigger players, like, hey, there's some opportunities to use this technology to improve the way things are done.
I love that you're using a utility token to sort of drive the early awareness or, participation among the people that are potentially wanting to watch the movie, or someone who's just likes the idea of being able to choose an actor for a movie, regardless of what kind of movie it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, we're trying to think of new ways to take what we learned in, our pre-crypto blockchain days and apply it and use the technology, so that we can let people come in and have, a voice, let them participate in what we're doing. And honestly, a lot of it's too to me, one of the things I get most excited about is when I look at the space, I see that the way that value is created and the way that value is distributed and shared is going to be transformed, by the technology. It already is being transformed. And I think that the potential to do that in a whole myriad of different ways and places, like, that's what I get excited about. Like, in our space right now, if I love Star Wars and I'm talking about Star Wars on social media, I'm creating a value for that brand. There's nothing I get for that. And so I think if there's a way to align those interests more clearly and directly, where people are getting value for the value they're creating and sharing, then that to me will create more virtuous cycles, between corporations and brands and the people. And because right now we have a problem in the world, in that there's a growing, gap, growing, inequality gap when you look at wealth, and it's only getting worse right now. And it is a serious issue, especially as we head towards automation, as we head towards AI and all these other things coming in and disrupting the world as we know it. There's going to have to be a major shift. And I know a lot of people in our space are aware of it and maybe take it for granted, but, and talk about, like, universal basic income and various concepts that, probably scares the shit out of politicians, excuse my language. But, the reality is that we are headed rapidly towards those kind of issues. So, we wanted to use the technology where we could, to solve, to do our part to show, how that can work, how that can be done. So.
Wow. That's awesome. I really hope you're successful, and I really hope that others who follow you take the initiative to learn from your experiences and are embracing the opportunities for themselves, because I do believe this is a game-changing opportunity, and it's right in front of us. We just have to take advantage of the path that's being led.
Yeah, it's awesome. JD, thank you for letting us know about the project. And, with the announcement of T0 and everything, we got a lot of people that are interested in it. And I've been seeing on social media what you mentioned in a different presentation about when you tag Atari, you end up getting billions of impressions. I'm seeing that on all this, wherever this has been up on Twitter and on Facebook. There's a lot more reach than what you'd normally see from something coming out of the blockchain space, since we haven't had a lot of news recently.
Yeah, and that's good for everyone. I mean, that's a lot of what we're doing is not just for the movie, but also to hopefully do our small part to help, the larger movement, you know, as it were. And if people want to learn more, they want to connect with other projects, they can find me on Telegram, just my name, or they can email me at jd@visiontree.co. Usually fairly accessible, or at least I try to be. And yeah, no, thank you guys for taking the time and for chatting. And Jeff, we haven't seen each other for a minute. I actually met you at the blockchain futurist conference, I believe it is, that Tracy Leparulo and Untraceable does, which I wanted to give her a little shout out because she's amazing. And yeah, hopefully,
are you gonna be there in August?
I'm gonna try. I would love to, and I love Toronto. Toronto in the summer is an amazing place to be.
Yeah. So come, I believe it's August 12th to the 14th.
I'm gonna try. That's one of my son's birthdays is the 14th, and the other one's the 9th. So it's right in the but maybe I'll make it a trip and I'll bring him out there. But and you're in New York, so for you guys, Toronto is like you just take a quick little trip, you know.
It's an hour away, yes. Well, I look forward to catching up either there or someplace again. And I really, there's things that we could do to help increase the awareness and help drive people to the project. We're happy to, and we appreciate your time on the podcast.